What is up, people? Van from the VaniverseGaming channel here, bringing you another video on Stoneshard. In today's video, I want to give you guys 20 tips for surviving in Stoneshard once you've made it through the prologue and made it to the actual game. Now, for some of you, if you haven't gotten through the prologue yet, you can click on the eye in the top right-hand corner, and that will take you to my playlist. I have a new player's guide and also a guide on how to beat the boss at the end of the prologue, and you're going to want to do that before you watch this guide, which gives you 20 tips on how to survive after you get out of the prologue. So without further ado, let's give you those 20 tips right now. So tip number 1. When you first start in the game after the prologue is over, you're going to get a choice between picking a melee type fighter, a range type fighter, and a caster type fighter. I would highly suggest picking either the caster or the range because having range damage in this game early on is extremely important. If you choose to take the melee fighter, then you're going to have to find a book which will teach you to use a bow or which will teach you pyromancy, and that might be difficult to do, and you definitely don't want to buy one because they're very expensive. So I highly recommend choosing a class that has a ranged type of fighting in the beginning. Number 2. Make sure you loot the town before you leave. Loot everything in town. There are a lot of things that you can get random drops that are in these different barrels and crates, and they can sell for some decent money, or they can also be used for your adventure. Number 3. Make sure that you sell to the appropriate vendor. So when you loot items, make sure the person who is the one who repairs the item will be the one you want to sell the item to, and that way you're going to get the most money from your sale. So for instance, if you have a club and it's wood, you're probably going to want to sell that to a carpenter, same with a bow and arrows, but if you have like a metal sword, you're going to want to sell that to the smith. Number 4, make sure you don't buy weapons and armor. The weapons and armor that you can buy from the vendors are way overpriced, and you can get the same items just by fighting in the game, doing quests and killing creatures. So save your money and do not spend it on vendors. Number 5. When you go out in the world, you want to make sure you're prepared for all of the things that could happen to you, and there's a couple things that you want to make sure you have. You only need a water skin. You don't need any more than that. You will need lots of food because you're going to go through food and water the most. So I would highly suggest getting like the meat haunch that allows you to eat it 4 times and never expires. And at least having 2 of those. 1 can get you through. You probably want 2. And then in addition to that, you're going to want the healing salves. You're going to want at least 3 of them, which will allow you to heal your limbs 9 times. That is extremely important. You're also going to want some alcohol to help with pain, and then you're also going to want some antidote to help with poisoning for alcohol. So I would say 1 antidote, 1 alcohol, that should get you through. Maybe 2 alcohols, depending on how much damage you plan on taking. Lastly, you're going to want to carry around 1 thing of bandages, the one that gives you 3 uses, just in case you have a bleed on you, which doesn't happen that often. But if you are bleeding and you don't have a way to stop it, you're in deep, deep trouble. Okay, number 6. When you're in the game, if you hold down your Alt key, it will show you what is on the ground that is lootable. This is good in the forest and also in dungeons, where when you're in the forest, you can't really see things. By holding Alt, it will show up the highlighted, item on the ground. Usually in the forest, it's going to be different plants and herbs you can pick up. And in the dungeon, it's going to be different things that you might have missed that came out of a broken barrel that you didn't see. Number 7. When you want to move around the map and see different parts of the map, you can do this by holding down your mouse wheel. By holding down your mouse wheel and moving your mouse, it actually moves your camera view to wherever you want it to be. That way you're not locked into forcing to move your character to see different areas of the map. This is really good where you can actually drag your camera all the way over to where you want to zone out of the map, and then click on the little arrow, and then your guy will just run there and you don't have to keep clicking. Tip number 8, stay on the road. So like a lot of other games, you want to stay on the road in this game if you don't want to get attacked. When you venture off of the road, you're more likely to encounter wolves and bears and other things that want to kill you, and so staying on the road is the best bet if you're on a quest and you want to make it there safely. Tip number 9. Animals are really good to farm for their pelts, but they're a terrible experience. So if you want to make a quick buck and you have a bow and some arrows, go kill some rabbits and go kill some wolves and go kill some deer, and then take their hides back and sell them to the leather worker. That is going to give you a good amount of cash early on, and you don't even have to do anything but go into the map that it's right next to town. Tip number 10. Creatures are what you're going to get the most experience off of. And what I mean creatures is when you do a quest and you enter a dungeon or you get ambushed by a bunch of thugs, the humanoid type creatures are going to be the ones, and the undead are going to give you the most experience. So if you're looking to level up, completing quests and killing those bandits and thugs is going to give you way more experience than going out and trying to kill animals that are around the map. Tip number 11. You do not need to buy more than one water skin. In all the towns, you will find a well, and if you right-click on that well, you can drink from it or you can fill up your water skin. So make sure that every time you stop back in town before you leave, you are filling your water skin before you leave town. Tip number 12. If you ever get an item that is identified or unidentified, do not sell it. It cannot be used because you don't know what its stats are. So when you are in your inn, there's a little chest that is beside your bed. Put all unidentified items into that chest until you get an identification scroll so you can identify the item. Tip number 13. When you loot an item that is unidentified, make sure that you do not waste money on a scroll to identify that item. Countless times you are going to spend more money on the identification scroll to identify the item to just find out that it's just a green piece of crap and you're going to sell it to the vendor for way less than what you spent on the identification scroll. Make sure to wait to loot an identification scroll before you, instead of buying one. Tip number 14. Dungeons can't be re-entered once you complete the quest. So if you're on a quest and you go into a dungeon and you clear that dungeon and you leave loot on the ground and you want to come back to get it, make sure you do not hand in the quest. If you hand in the quest, then that dungeon is locked and you cannot go back. If you don't hand in the quest, you can go to town, sell all your stuff, and then go back to the dungeon and keep looting it up until you have looted everything that you have wanted. Tip number 15. Quests expire. So make sure you only pick up one quest at a time. They have a day limit on each of the quests, and if you're on multiple at a time, there's a good chance that one of them will expire while you're trying to work on the other one. So only really keep one quest going at a time. Tip number 16. Don't break items in a dungeon floor until you've wiped out all the enemies. So when you're in a dungeon, make sure you go through all the rooms and kill all the enemies first. Once all the enemies are dead, then you can go back through and break all the barrels and boxes and loot everything. By breaking barrels and boxes, you actually alert the enemies to your presence, and that will actually cause more and more enemies to attack you, and you won't be nearly as stealthy. Tip number 17. Don't be afraid to save and run. This game, you can only save at an inn, so don't be afraid to get 10-15 minutes out of town and then want to go back and save because you got a lot of good stuff. And also, don't be afraid to run. If you have 2 or 3 guys that are chasing you, run away. You don't want to die because you don't want to lose all of your progress. Tip number 18. When you pick up a book that is a skill book, once you have read the skill book and you've learned the skills, there's no need to keep that book. You can then go and sell it to the vendor and make money on that book. Tip number 19. Only loot high-valued items in the dungeon. You only have so much space, and so you make sure that you only want to loot items that you can sell for the most amount of money. And also, if you want to come back, you can, but for the most part, you're probably not going to. So you just want to loot and fill your bag with only necessary items that have the highest value that you can sell to the vendors. And tip number 20, the last tip. In this game, if you choose to have a bow and arrow, arrows break when you fire them. So if you leave town with 20 and you fire 20, you're probably only going to get, say, 10 back because the ones that are actually hitting the guys are breaking. So make sure that you bring another stack of arrows in your inventory so that you have enough arrows to get through a dungeon and back to town. So those are the 20 tips that I wanted to cover with you guys. I really hope these tips are helpful. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below. And if there's anything I didn't cover that you think should be added, also leave those in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. This is Van from the VaniverseGaming channel. Cheers and peace out.